I've been working in whisky on the design side for a long time, and as my passion for it grew, I've been doing a lot of reading about the history of distilleries in Scotland, and that's often just the story of different families trying to kill each other, competing, letting their egos get the better of each other. And at a certain point, I was like, God, this is just like Macbeth. And at that point, I realised that Macbeth would be the perfect structure for a whisky collection to talk about the whole of Scotch. I've been lucky enough to work with Sir Quentin Blake for over 20 years now, and he's the most extraordinary person. He's 90 years old and he's still drawing all day, every day. And so obviously, when I was thinking about the Macbeth project, it was a dream of mine that he might illustrate the labels. When I first went to talk to him about it, and I said, how do you feel about illustrating all the characters of Macbeth? He wasn't entirely sold. He didn't seem very keen at all until I suggested he might draw them as birds. And then he's like, oh yeah, actually, I might enjoy doing that, because I knew how much he enjoys drawing birds, particularly anthropomorphic birds. And then he rang me first thing the next morning to say he'd already done the roughs. And I was like, how is that possible? He said, I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I didn't have anything to do, so I've drawn all the roughs in bed. And this sort of folio arrived with these rough drawings, and they were just so perfect. You could just see how the whole thing was going to fit together. It was one of the most exciting moments of my working life.
Well, I got this mysterious call from Lexi one day saying, I've got an idea. Can I come down and see you? And he came down, and with him he had a portfolio of drawings by Quentin Blake.
Oh, come on in. What comes across immediately is that he knows the play inside out.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all so utterly believable.
Oh, there's an ink version of the portrait.
Oh, great. I know exactly.
What's
exactly what that's going to be. Porter.
Yeah.
That's a big fat sherry cask.
Yeah, he looks like a big fat sherry cask.
I'm immediately beginning to think about how this all works out, for it's really exciting. Is that it has to be dictated by the play. The whisky has to be relevant to that character. It has to fit. There has to be an absolute link between them. And then also that link between the character and the way that Quentin's drawn it. For me, what happened, once I'd kind of got this kind of big blocks of ideas in terms of darkness and light and smoke, etc., and in my mind, I then went back and wrote character notes for every character, giving an idea then of the flavour that should be coming through. I then gave that document across to Ollie and Sukhinder and went, well, this is where we are.
Why did you do it?
Yeah. Make me laugh. Stop smiling.
That's all right. Why did you do it? Come on.
Interesting ideas to work with are quite slim. And I think it was a challenge because these images were individually hand-drawn, hand-painted. It was something very different. I mean, look, whisky is our life. I've been in it for nearly 40, 50 years. It just was too exciting.
It's clearly truly mad, but absolutely fascinating. I think it's probably one of the most challenging projects we've ever done. So the process of putting the whiskies together started with Dave's notes. It started with his interpretation of the characters, both in terms of who they were, but also their flavour camps there from Dave's perspective. And then you had Quentin's drawings, which are Quentin's interpretation of the characters that give kind of life to them. And then, of course, you've got the play itself, and my job was to kind of bring that together in terms of the flavours, and trying to think about which distilleries, which casks would help to create those flavours, and whether the characters are broody and big and dark, or light and jovial, and do those whiskies represent that?
So I receive a box of whiskies from Ollie and Sukhinder, and it was pretty it was quite nerve-wracking. Would they work? Wouldn't they work? They absolutely nailed it. I thought that's absolutely spot on. In fact, there were only 2 whiskies which I rejected, which really annoyed Lexi. The first one in particular, which was The First Murderer, which is an amazing whiskey, which he loved, and an extraordinary dram. But it was too nice. It was not murdery enough.
You know, it wasn't evil, it wasn't smoky, it wasn't nasty, it wasn't dark. And also, one of the witches was just not witchy enough. So the characters won out. You know, it wasn't my fault. The characters spoke.
One of the things I loved was the breadth of ambition, but the idea that it could be inclusive. You could have these incredibly luxurious high-end whiskies like we have King Duncan and with the Glen Grant that are almost unattainable by many people. But at the same time, you would find whiskies to represent characters in a household that should be available to everyone to buy. And you can take people from a journey all the way through the play, but all the way through whiskey as it is today.
The reason people fall in love with whiskey, because you have so many flavours, so many distilleries, so many styles with all the different casks, that you need a lifetime to learn. I think what we've put together is absolutely amazing. We're really, really excited.
Would we do it again? Would I do it again? So few projects involve multiple companies coming together with one vision. And although having multiple companies definitely makes for a more challenging environment, it also, I think, makes for better whiskey and a better bottle in the end of the day.
And what I'm really looking forward to is actually discussing them with people, because my idea of what the character is might not be other people's idea of what the character is, but the discussion won't be about the quality of the whiskey, because the whiskey is fantastic. It's kind of, is this actually Satan? Is this actually a Thane, etc., etc.? So I'm looking forward to that debate. It's our interpretation of Macbeth.